They figured it'd be a clever way to teach me a life lesson by leaving me stranded during our family trip. My uncle declared I'd learn to fend for myself, handed me $40, and drove off. I was 18. I didn't protest, I just hailed a cab. 9 years later, they showed up at my law firm's front desk, pleading for help. I stayed seated. I calmly told them security would show them out. Now, at 27, I never imagined I'd be sharing this story. Recent events have made me rethink everything about family, trust, and the cost of trying to teach someone a lesson. 9 years ago, I was 18, fresh out of high school. My uncle had organized a big family getaway to a mountain cabin for a week with him, my aunt, and my 3 cousins. My parents had passed away in a car crash when I was 16, and my uncle had taken me in as my legal guardian. He wasn't harsh, but he believed in tough love, which often felt more like punishment dressed up as a life lesson. The trip started off well enough. We traveled in 2 cars, spent the first few days hiking and enjoying board games. It felt like the first real family moment since my parents' death. I should have seen the signs. On the 4th morning, I woke up to an eerie quiet. The cabin felt hollow. I called out for everyone walking through empty rooms. Their bags, clothes, even the food they'd brought, gone. All that remained was a note on the kitchen counter and 2 $20 bills. The note, in my uncle's handwriting, said they'd decided I needed to learn independence before college. This was my challenge. $40 to make it home, over 300 miles away. The cabin was paid for through the weekend, giving me 3 days to sort it out. He wrote that this would build essential skills and that he believed in me. I read that note for what felt like forever, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to panic or break down. But a strange calm took over, a sharp clarity I'd never felt before. They thought leaving an 18-year-old in the middle of nowhere was a game, a way to build character. I didn't call them or beg. I contacted a taxi service and asked about the fare to the nearest bus station. It was $65. I shared my situation with the dispatcher, who connected me with a driver willing to accept $40 and my watch, a graduation gift from my parents, as payment. The bus journey home took 14 hours with multiple transfers. I had just enough left for a small meal. When I walked into my uncle's house at 2 a.m., they were all in the living room, waiting like they'd staged a grand reveal. My uncle stood with a proud grin, ready to praise me for passing their test. I walked past them without a word and went to my room. When my uncle followed, explaining how this would make me stronger, I told him I understood perfectly. I understood that family meant little to him, that he saw me as a burden he could manipulate. I was on my own. He tried to soften it, saying it was just about preparing me for college's challenges. I nodded and said he'd succeeded beyond his expectations. That fall, I started college, scraping together every scholarship and grant I could find. I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover the rest. I never asked my uncle for a cent and stopped spending holidays or summers at his house. When he called, I was civil but kept my distance. When my cousins reached out, I replied but never initiated. College led to law school, funded by loans and a job at a firm focused on corporate disputes. I excelled, perhaps because I'd learned early that people could betray you while claiming it was for your own good. After graduating, I joined a top-tier firm downtown and climbed the ranks quickly. 5 years ago, I became a partner. 2 years ago, I started my own firm with 3 colleagues we recruited from our old company. We focused on high-stakes corporate defense, earning a reputation for being relentless yet effective. Our clients included major companies across the state. I'd built something of my own. My office on the 20th floor had a view of the city skyline. I drove a car worth more than some homes. I owned a custom-designed loft downtown. More importantly, I surrounded myself with people who valued boundaries and earned loyalty, not demanded it. My uncle's family tried to reconnect over the years, but their gestures felt empty. They sent holiday cards with long messages about missing me. My aunt left voicemails on my birthday, inviting me to family events. My cousins followed me on social media, acting like nothing had happened. I responded politely but declined their invitations. When they asked why I stayed distant, I reminded them of the cabin. They'd dismiss it, saying I was clinging to a grudge over something meant to help me. They'd point to my success as proof their plan worked. That's when I realized they didn't grasp the harm they'd caused. They believed my achievements justified their actions, missing that I'd succeeded in spite of them, not because of them. Last month, everything shifted. I was reviewing contracts in my office when my assistant, looking uneasy, said a family claiming to be my relatives was at reception, demanding to see me urgently. They had no appointment but seemed frantic. My gut sank. Her description matched my uncle, aunt, and their now-adult kids. I told her to inform them I was unavailable and to leave. 20 minutes later, she returned, saying they refused to go, insisting it was a family emergency and that I'd want to hear them out. My uncle had told the receptionist I'd understand once I knew their situation. I went to the reception area myself. There they were, huddled together, looking worn and desperate. My uncle was grayer, more tired than I remembered. My aunt clutched a folder tightly. My cousins seemed uneasy, like they knew they shouldn't be there. When my uncle saw me, his face brightened with relief. He approached, arms outstretched for a hug, talking quickly about how grateful he was that I'd see them, how he knew I'd help once I understood. I stood still, expressionless, and asked what they wanted. Their story came out in fragments. My uncle's small construction business, which he'd run for 2 decades, was being sued by a former client for shoddy work that caused major property damage. The damages sought could ruin him financially. The case was complex, involving construction regulations and liability, exactly the kind my firm handled. They'd approached 3 other lawyers, but none would take it, either due to high costs, slim chances of winning, or full schedules. My uncle had learned of my success and saw me as their last hope. My aunt opened her folder, revealing articles about my firm, website printouts, and case mentions she'd collected, like she was building a case for why I should help. My uncle said they could lose their home, business, and savings. He mentioned my cousin's futures and the family's reputation. He acknowledged I might still be upset about the cabin incident, but urged me to set it aside for something this critical. The cabin incident. 9 years later, he still reduced it to that. I listened silently as they laid out their plea. My uncle looked at me, expecting me to jump in and save them. My aunt wiped tears from her eyes. My cousins stared at the floor. I told them I understood their predicament and that legal issues like theirs were tough, especially when they threatened everything. I sympathized and wished them luck finding the right attorney. My uncle's expression shifted as he realized I wasn't offering help. He asked if I was refusing, and I confirmed my firm wouldn't take their case. He spoke faster, emphasizing family, how he'd raised me after my parents' death, how this was my chance to repay him. He said I owed them. That same cold clarity from 9 years ago washed over me. I agreed family should help family. I told him I'd learned that lesson well. When I was 18, stranded 300 miles from home with $40, my family taught me I was alone. When I worked multiple jobs to fund college while they went on vacations without me, they showed me self-reliance trumped support. When I spent holidays alone while they gathered, they taught me belonging was conditional. I thanked them for those lessons. I'd learned independence so well that I'd built a life without needing family ties or expecting help from those who'd shown their true colors. My uncle argued the cabin was different, meant to help me grow, that they'd always been there when it mattered. I asked him to name one time after my parents' death when he prioritized my well-being over his lessons. I asked him to explain the difference between abandoning someone vulnerable and refusing to help those who'd abandoned you. He had no answer. My aunt tried to interject, talking about forgiveness, but I wasn't interested in discussing it with people who never admitted fault. I told them their choice 9 years ago defined our relationship. They'd decided I was someone they could leave behind, whose feelings mattered less than their goals. They'd shown me family bonds were conditional, easily set aside to prove a point. I'd learned that lesson fully, and now they wanted me to unlearn it because they needed me. Security arrived. I'd signaled them earlier. I told my uncle's family to leave and warned that returning or contacting me again would be considered harassment. My uncle made a final plea, asking what it would take for me to help, offering to pay any retainer, admit mistakes, or apologize for the cabin. I told him there was nothing I wanted from him. The 18-year-old who needed family was gone. The man before him had thrived without them. As security escorted them out, I heard my aunt sobbing and one cousin asking if I really wouldn't help. I didn't respond. I returned to my office and shut the door. 3 weeks later, I started getting calls from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Word of my refusal had spread, with mixed reactions. Some called me petty, saying my success meant I could help without much cost and that holding on to old grudges was immature. They reminded me my uncle raised me after my parents' death, and I should be grateful. Others were supportive. My father's brother, who I rarely contact, said he'd always questioned my uncle's parenting. He'd tried to step in when I was younger but was told to stay out of it. He respected my choice and understood why I made it. The most surprising call came from my uncle's oldest daughter, now 25. She's been struggling with their family dynamics and started therapy. She apologized for staying silent during the cabin incident, admitting she knew it was wrong but was too scared to challenge her parents. She said seeing me stand my ground at the office was both painful and inspiring, showing her boundaries could be set with family. She asked to meet for coffee, not to discuss the lawsuit, but to reconnect. I agreed. We met at a downtown cafe, and for the first time in years, I had an honest conversation with a family member. She admired how I'd built a life despite everything, and said she'd wanted to reach out but didn't know how, especially since her parents blamed me for our distance. I shared how therapy helped me process abandonment issues and learn to form healthy relationships despite my early experiences. My refusal to help wasn't about revenge, but protecting boundaries I'd worked hard to establish. She understood, surprising me with her empathy. She's been setting her own boundaries with her parents, trying to break free from their blame-heavy dynamic. Through family gossip, I heard my uncle found a lawyer to take their case. I don't know details and don't care to. Their legal troubles aren't my burden. 2 months after the office confrontation, the family drama has mostly faded, though I still get occasional guilt-tripping messages from relatives urging me to reconsider. This experience has made me more aware of patterns in my relationships. At work, I've built a team that values clear communication and mutual respect. My partners and I created a firm where boundaries matter, and success comes from support, not tests. It's the environment I needed growing up but never had. In my personal life, I've chosen better people, friends who show up consistently without manipulation. I've learned to spot red flags early and walk away before getting entangled with those who'd let me down. My cousin and I have stayed in touch. She's working on her independence, and we've connected over the challenge of building healthy relationships after growing up with dysfunctional ones. Through her, I learned my departure caused tension in their household. My uncle expected I'd beg to return, and my success made him bitter, calling me ungrateful. My aunt wanted to apologize, but was convinced by my uncle it would validate my overreaction. My cousins grew up hearing I was stubborn, that my success proved the cabin incident helped me, and my resentment was a flaw. This explained their entitled desperation. They believed they'd done nothing wrong, and my refusal broke their view of unconditional family duty. But unconditional support goes both ways. They expected my help without question but made their support conditional when I was vulnerable. I've started dating someone, a lawyer from another firm. She's kind, straightforward, and has a healthy family dynamic. When I shared the cabin story and recent events, she was stunned, saying she couldn't imagine treating anyone that way, especially a grieving teen. Her perspective validated that their actions were harmful, which was more healing than I expected. 6 months after their visit, I feel this chapter has closed. My cousin and I stay in contact. She's moved out, renting her own place, and is setting stronger boundaries with her parents' drama. She told me their lawsuit settled out of court, costing them enough to force downsizing their home and business, but they're not ruined. The ordeal sparked some reflection. My aunt confronted my uncle about his treatment of me, shaken by my firm rejection. She questioned what they'd really achieved by leaving me at the cabin. My uncle admitted the incident stemmed from his frustration at raising me, not a desire to teach responsibility. He'd resented taking me in but masked it as tough love. My aunt suggested a letter of apology, but he's hesitant, fearing I'd reject it or accept it without reconciling. I understand his reluctance. A real apology would mean admitting their actions caused lasting harm and that my response was justified. It would mean accepting they lost me through their choices. I've found peace with this. I'm not angry, but I'm not interested in rebuilding with people who minimized my pain for years. Their newfound self-reflection doesn't undo the damage. My cousin asked if I'd ever reconcile if they apologized sincerely. I said I don't know. The teen who needed their approval is gone. I've built a life without their validation. If they apologize for their own sake, I won't stop them, but if they expect it to restore what was, they'll be disappointed. That dynamic, where they held power, is over. I'm no longer the kid they could abandon for lessons. Sometimes the healthiest choice is letting toxic ties end naturally. Some bridges should burn. They taught me I could survive alone, and they were right. I did. I built something better than what I lost. I'm thankful for that lesson, even if I don't thank them for it. My uncle wanted me to learn self-reliance. He succeeded. I learned to be accountable for my choices and loyal only to those who have earned it. Family is what you create, not what you're born into. Sometimes the strongest move is walking away from those who don't value you. They thought leaving me behind was a funny lesson. They were wrong about the humor, but right about the lesson. I learned it so well that when they needed me, I applied it fully. The best revenge is living well and letting others face the consequences of their actions. I didn't need to punish them. Their choices had already shaped our relationship. I just stopped pretending otherwise